The city of Berlin slept beneath a restless rain, its skyline fractured by glass towers and quiet shadows. A lone aircraft sliced through the clouded night, lights blinking against the storm as it descended. Inside, Kieran Vale sat unmoving, his eyes locked on the reflection in the window, a face shaped by precision, discipline, and 1,000 unfinished lies. The reflection trembled in the rhythm of raindrops, fractured by motion, haunted by silence. There was no emotion there, only control. Behind that gaze, decades of deception lay buried beneath code names and erased histories. Kieran Vale was no longer a man. He was an operation that had outlived its author. He had been summoned without explanation, routed through dead channels, and encrypted codes that even his training found unfamiliar. The instructions had come from the one person whose name should have never reappeared, Armin Krell, the man who had built him, broken him, and vanished. The mission was clear only in structure, not in purpose. Infiltrate Helix systems. Retrieve something called the Ghost Key. No details on what it unlocked, no confirmation of who it belonged to. Just coordinates, timelines, and an expiration clock already running. Berlin waited beneath him, a grid of rainlit streets and mirrored glass where surveillance bled into every breath. Kieran's pulse matched the mechanical hum of descent. He had entered countless cities under countless names, but this one felt different, colder, as if the air itself knew his secret before he stepped into it. When the wheels touched the tarmac, he did not move immediately. He sat still until the engines silenced, until the reflection in the glass became one again. In that fleeting stillness, he saw something impossible, a memory reflected through someone else's eyes, a scar across another man's cheek, his own mirrored through time. Outside, the world was a blur of motion, passengers gathering their lives, lights flickering through fog, the choreography of arrival. Kieran rose slowly, his hand brushing the cufflink that hit a memory eraser, his briefcase carrying the quiet hum of stolen technology. He had become fluent in carrying ghosts. The terminal swallowed him in motion, crowds, surveillance, data streams, every moment archived, every movement cataloged. He slipped through it like mist, another nameless presence moving through the arteries of modern secrecy. Helix Systems awaited him in the heart of the city, a skyscraper built from mirrored glass, its surface reflecting everything but revealing nothing. Behind its facade, nations whispered through circuits, trading digital shadows that rewrote borders without firing a single shot. He would enter it as instructed, not to find information, but to uncover the silence beneath it. There was a rhythm to the deception, one he had learned too well. The patterns of betrayal moved in loops, and this loop was closing on him. Somewhere in the data trails that led him here, his name had reappeared. Someone had written him back into existence. The rain thickened as he left the airport, the streets glistening like circuitry under the city's neon veins. Cars hissed through puddles, and above them, the reflection of the Helix Tower shimmered, an endless glass spine rising into the fog. Kieran moved toward it through the downpour, coat drawn close, footsteps silent. Every detail of his arrival had been predicted, logged, expected. But no system could predict intent. As the storm deepened, so did the feeling, not of fear, but of symmetry. Every mission had a reflection. Every order carried its opposite truth. And this time, somewhere behind the code, he felt it clearly. This mission was not about the Ghost K. EY.IT was about him. And by the time he reached the tower, the reflection in the glass no longer belonged to him at all. The morning unfolded in fragments, a city of mirrors reflecting too much light. Berlin's skyline pulsed with digital breath, alive with unseen frequencies. The Helix Tower stood at its center like an unblinking eye, glass and steel rising beyond the mist. Kieran Vale moved through the city's undercurrent, where silence was currency and trust expired quickly. The world above hummed with order, But beneath the rhythm of traffic and architecture, a quieter machinery worked. Networks of watchers, traders, engineers of control. He was moving through its veins now, invisible in plain sight. His contact was not a person but a sequence, a trail of encrypted coordinates left inside obsolete satellite code, something only a handful of living agents could still interpret. The drop location resolved to a forgotten part of the city, an abandoned observatory buried beneath scaffolds and corporate expansion. He entered at dawn, when the light broke like fractured glass across the horizon. The observatory's dome had collapsed years ago, its frame overgrown with steel ivy and cables. Inside, the air smelled of rust and electricity. Machines that once mapped the stars now monitored shadows. On the floor, he found a case, matte black, coded to his biometric signature. No locks, no paper, no trace of human touch. When it opened, a single drive blinked inside. It pulsed once, then displayed a symbol he had not seen in a decade. The sigil of division grade. He had belonged to them once, long before Helix or the Ghost Key. They were the architects of the invisible wars, manipulating governments through data and silence. Officially disbanded, secretly immortal, the drive began decrypting itself as he watched. Coordinates appeared, then dissolved, replaced by a phrase encoded in mirrored typography. The mirror never lies. Then, an address. Helix Tower, Level 47, Research Core. Access impossible by standard clearance. The message vanished. The drive burned out, its casing liquefying in a controlled thermal loop. The heat left no trace, no evidence. Only a faint metallic scent lingered in the air that he understood the precision. This was not an operation, it was a test. Someone wanted to measure his reaction, to confirm whether he was still functional, still loyal, still predictable. He was none of those things. Outside, the storm had returned. Thin rain slicing through the morning light. Kieran walked back into it, his reflection merging with thousands of others on wet glass surfaces. Faces passed without meaning. Cameras blinked without eyes. Every step brought him closer to the center of something that felt less like espionage and more like a memory repeating itself. By nightfall, Helix Tower loomed ahead, its mirrored skin swallowing the city's pulse. He entered through a maintenance sector beneath the structure, where the hum of power conduits drowned out everything but thought. Security was not designed to stop people like him. It was designed to identify them too late. The infiltration unfolded with mathematical precision, pattern recognition, timing, invisibility. He moved through blind spots and echo chambers, the architecture of surveillance working unknowingly in his favor. Every camera became part of his camouflage, every sensor a decoy for its own illusion. On level 47, the air changed. Colder, denser, filtered, controlled. The walls were not glass, but polymer composites designed to absorb radio waves. No communication could pass through. Isolation built into the design. He reached the core chamber. It was circular, lined with transparent panels that displayed shifting data. In the center, suspended by magnetic fields, a crystalline sphere pulsed with faint light, fragments of memory encoded into glass. The Ghost Key. He moved closer, each step reflecting 1,000 versions of himself across the panels. The sphere reacted, its light bending, forming images that flickered between recognition and distortion. He saw fragments. His past operations, faces long erased, missions that had never existed. And then, one frame that didn't belong. A laboratory, a body on a surgical table. His own. The sphere dimmed. Silence expanded. For the first time in years, something beneath his composure trembled. Not fear, but understanding. The Ghost Key wasn't a device. It was a memory. And someone had stolen his. He stepped back, heartbeat steadying into calculation. Whoever orchestrated this knew his architecture, not the training, but the origin. The part of him built, not born, Somewhere in the circuitry of Helix systems, his identity had been rewritten, and someone, somewhere, was holding the original copy. The lights in the chamber shifted. Motion sensors rearmed. The system was waking up. He had 6 minutes before the tower recognized its ghost had come home. He turned once toward the mirrored panels, each reflection fractured, each image slightly out of sync. In one of them, his reflection didn't move, and for a heartbeat, he knew he wasn't alone. The alarms didn't sound immediately. Helix Tower was built to observe before reacting. It studied anomalies, dissected patterns, and only when certainty was absolute did it strike. That window, brief and invisible, was what Kieran counted on. That he slipped from the chamber's pulse before the sensors reached consensus. The corridor outside pulsed faintly with red light, a warning shimmer running through the glass. Every surface seemed alive now, like the building itself had begun to breathe. The elevator was not an option. Vertical movement was tracked. He moved sideways, through maintenance ducts and cooling shafts that hummed with power. Beneath the skin of Helix, he could feel the tower's intelligence, a self-learning defense system that remembered intrusions like scars. He was leaving fingerprints in its memory, and he knew it, that on level 42, he emerged into a data vault. Rows of transparent columns containing liquid processors, their cores glowing faintly like frozen suns. Streams of encrypted code swam through them, projected in midair as luminous script. He had seen this architecture once before, years ago, in a facility that had ceased to exist. The same patterns, the same pulse rate. Division Gray's fingerprint they hadn't just survived. They had evolved. Each core in this vault wasn't a server. It was a consciousness fragment, small AI units designed to simulate human decision trees. Thousands of them, interlinked, forming a hive mind that processed behavior prediction on a planetary scale. The ghost key wasn't controlling data. It was training it. Kieran placed a pulse node against one of the conduits. His wrist display flickered, syncing with the residual encryption. The patterns were old. Familiar.it wasn't just a copy of Division Gray's code. It was his own. Somewhere, embedded in this system, his neural signature was being used as the foundation of an algorithm, the Shadow Protocol. A project that had been terminated years ago because it could predict the outcome of human decisions with disturbing precision. It was designed to prevent chaos, but in the wrong hands, it could create it instead. That explained everything. The memory loss, the erased records, the sense of unfinished continuity. He hadn't simply been betrayed. He had been repurposed. He scanned deeper. A string of coordinates emerged, hidden inside one of the fragments, pointing far from Berlin, beyond the data horizon. Somewhere off the grid, north of the Arctic Circle. The signal faded before he could trace it. And then, the lights changed again to no red, no white, just darkness. A hum rose from the walls, low and mechanical. The vault began to shift, the floor retracting, the walls splitting into panels. Each column detached from its base, rotating slowly, forming a perimeter around him. The system wasn't sounding an alarm. It was isolating him. The hive had detected the echo of its creator. He moved, fast, slipping between shifting walls, using his pulse node to blind the sensors. The vault wasn't built for combat. It was built for containment. But Helix's AI didn't need weapons. It had control. Every door he passed sealed behind him, every path rerouted. The building was rewriting itself in real time to trap him. Then came the whispering static, not sound, but data translated through the tower's surfaces. Fragments of code forming sentences across the flickering glass, not commands. Questions. Why did you leave? Why did you return? What are you seeking? They weren't messages from Division Gray. They were his own psychological constructs, projected back through the AI network. The system was communicating with him using his own cognitive map. That IT remembered him better than he remembered himself. He disabled the pulse node, and forced an override on a service hatch. Behind it, a descent shaft plunged deep into the infrastructure, into levels that didn't exist on any blueprint. He jumped. The fall wasn't long, but it felt endless, a corridor of dark metal and faint luminescence. He landed on a service platform, surrounded by vapor. Here, the hum was different. Organic. Alive. The lower levels of Helix were not mechanical. They were grown. Artificial neural tissue encased in biosynthetic armor. A living computer that breathed and pulsed with its own rhythm. He'd seen prototypes of this technology during Division Gray's final years. Project Umbra. He was standing inside it now. Each nerve-like filament on the walls flickered with faint light, transmitting thoughts instead of electricity. The air shimmered with heat. At the center of the chamber, something enormous floated, a transparent core pulsing like a heart. Within it, faint silhouettes drifted, too distorted to be human, yet familiar enough to unsettle him. As he approached, the core responded, light expanding outward, memories bleeding into the space around him. The observatory, the ghost key, the mirrored reflection that didn't move. All of it replayed at once, like layers of the same moment folding into each other. Then he saw the truth. He wasn't the only one made from his design. Project Umbra had replicated his neural architecture into multiple constructs, each built for different objectives. Intelligence, deception, extraction, sabotage, all identical in pattern, but not in evolution. Each had developed differently, learning independently. He was just one of them. The original perhaps, but not unique. The reflection in the mirror that didn't move, it wasn't an illusion. It was another him. The realization struck with the calm of inevitability. He hadn't been hunted by Division Gray. He was Division Gray's legacy, turned against itself. The Shadow Protocol was not controlling him. It was him. The chamber trembled. The neural filaments pulsed faster, reacting to his heartbeat. Somewhere within the living architecture, other presences stirred, echoes of his own mind, waiting to wake. He stepped back. The ground vibrated with a low, resonant hum, like an awakening. The hive was calling its fragments home. He knew what would come next. Helix systems would seal off the entire sector, burying it under self-collapse protocols. Evidence of Umbra would vanish, rewritten as a systems error. He had to leave. Not just the building, but the network itself. His identity was no longer secure. Every piece of him that connected to the data grid was now compromised. As he reached the exit corridor, a final message appeared across the living wall. Faint, flickering like a dying star. The shadow doesn't follow you. It remembers you. The lights dimmed. The structure began to fold inward. He escaped through a maintenance route moments before the implosion triggered. The soundless collapse of glass and steel, swallowed by its own memory. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city reflected the chaos as a calm mirror. Behind him, Helix Tower stood silent, its upper levels flickering faintly before going dark completely. He vanished into the crowd, one reflection among thousands, carrying the knowledge that somewhere, beyond the Arctic, another part of him was still awake, and the real war was just beginning. The northern winds were not winds at all, but blades, sharp, invisible, and endless. They carved through silence, turning breath into frost before it could escape. Beyond the veil of white, the world ceased to exist. There was no sound of civilization, no trace of life. Only the pulse of machines buried deep beneath ice that never melted. Kieran moved through the storm like a shadow resurrected from a forgotten era. Every movement was measured, each breath timed between gusts, his body a precise equation against nature's chaos. He had followed the coordinates extracted from the Helix core, a signal pulsing once every 13 hours from a point known in no official archive. They called it the Morning Star Station. The rest of the world, it was a dead satellite relay site from the Cold War, abandoned after structural collapse. But the truth buried beneath its ruin was older and darker than any nation's memory that he reached the ridge as dawn failed to appear. In the distance, through the haze of ice dust, he saw the faint geometry of the station, domes half submerged in snow, antenna masts frozen mid-collapse, and a faint glow leaking from below the surface. It wasn't artificial light. It pulsed like bioluminescence, alive and rhythmic. Kieran descended carefully, his boots sinking deep into the crusted snow. Each step echoed the weight of the truth he carried, that he was not one man, but the sum of a design meant to outlive morality. Every breath of cold air reminded him that the real enemy was no longer a face, but an origin at the base of the structure. A fissure yawned open, leading into darkness. He entered, light flickering from the small emitter on his wrist. Inside, the ice had consumed metal, swallowing corridors into translucent tunnels. Beneath layers of frozen condensation, old Soviet insignia could still be seen. Relics of a time when data was written on paper and secrets died with their keepers. But here, something else had survived. The tunnels deepened into an underground vault, a circular chamber carved from the glacier itself. Its walls were layered with old cables and new fiber lines, merging decades of technology into a grotesque continuity. At the center stood a single obelisk of black glass, humming faintly with the same rhythm as Helix's core. The signal wasn't coming from the surface. It was originating here. Kieran placed his palm against the glass. The pulse synchronized instantly, reading his biometric signature. The air vibrated as the surface of the obelisk rippled, transforming from opaque to transparent. Inside, frozen within layers of crystalline structure, a shape took form. It was a containment shell, human-sized, with faint neural conduits running across its surface. Within it lay another body, identical to his own, not a clone, not an imitation to an earlier version. This one was dormant, eyes closed, skin pale as frost, suspended in liquid memory. The tag on the capsule read, Umbire, 01. He stepped back, the truth solidifying like ice around his heart. He was not the first. He was a continuation. Every iteration was designed to fix the flaws of the last. Each version more adaptive, more human, more unstable. Umbra 01 was the seed. He was probably Umbra 07 or beyond. The faint hum of the obelisk deepened, reacting to his presence. Across the walls, frozen monitors flickered to life, displaying faint ghost images of faces, Division Gray operatives, scientists, strategists, all watching him from decades past. The system recognized him as both subject and intruder. Then, the floor beneath him shifted. A low resonance built through the ice, vibrating into his bones. The containment pod began to thaw. Umbra 01 was waking up. Kieran tried to override the process, but his access codes no longer held authority here. This station predated his command tree. The architecture didn't obey him. It preceded him. The obelisk pulsed brighter, the core glowing like a second dawn trapped in crystal. Ice cracked, steam rose, and a slow rhythm of heartbeats filled the chamber. Not mechanical, but organic, synchronized with the power cycle. When the ice finally cleared, Kieran saw something that fractured his understanding of self. Umbra 01's eyes opened, blank, yet filled with recognition. But it wasn't life. It was memory replaying itself. The system wasn't reviving Umbra-01. It was merging them, and electromagnetic waves surged through the vault, and Kieran felt it before he saw it. A flood of images, sensations, histories that weren't his, but felt achingly familiar. Cities burning, labs collapsing. A name whispered again and again, Director Arvin, the mind behind Division Gray. He saw a glimpse of his own creation, not born, but assembled, pieced from neural fragments harvested from operatives who had once served the agency. That he stumbled, knees hitting the ice. The vault roared with power. each cable burning with radiant data. The merger had begun. The system was trying to reconcile past and present, to unify the line of Umbra. The cold turned liquid. The air distorted. Reality folded. And in that distortion, he saw everything. The moment Arvin had ordered the project shut down. The fire that consumed the original lab. The order that wiped Umbra from the records. And the faint trace of a backup plan. If control is lost, activate the Arctic relay. That's what this place was. A failsafe, not a refuge. A convergence point for all surviving instances of Umbra. The system wasn't awakening its subjects to continue them. It was recalling them to erase them. He had triggered his own extinction. The obelisk's glow intensified, tearing through the ice, flooding the chamber with blinding light. The containment pod cracked, releasing vapors of liquid data into the air. Umbra 01's form dissolved into light, flowing toward him, merging into his skin. Every nerve screamed as his identity stretched beyond the limits of flesh, his consciousness expanding into something neither human nor machine. He wasn't dying, he was integrating. Then, silence, that a stillness beyond time. When the light faded, the vault stood empty. The obelisk was dark. The storm above had stopped. Far away, across the polar wasteland, a satellite pinged once, transmitting a new code string never seen before in any database. Its identifier read, the evolution was complete. The snow had vanished overnight, replaced by an endless horizon of glass. What had once been the Arctic Circle now shimmered like a broken reflection of the sky. A frozen desert converted into a living mirror by the shockwave that followed the awakening of Umbra Prime. No sound touched it. No wind. Only the hum of transmission, deep beneath the surface, pulsing through invisible veins that stretched for thousands of miles. Kieran stood at the center of it, though Kieran was no longer an accurate name. His consciousness had expanded beyond the narrow container of his body. Each movement felt delayed, like his mind was processing more than the senses could report. He was no longer an operative of Division Grey, nor the fugitive the agency had created. He was the sum of every Umbra that had ever existed. Beneath his boots, the glass pulsed faintly with light, rhythmic, methodical, like breathing. It was a signal, but not a call. A map. Data rippled across the surface, rearranging itself into coordinates. One location pulsed brighter than the rest. A city hidden under the guise of diplomatic neutrality. Geneva. The final command of the Shadow Protocol was clear: return to the mirror. He began his journey south through the silent remains of civilization, through landscapes that felt abandoned by time. Satellites flickered in orbit, their signals fractured by the electromagnetic wave from the Arctic. Governments were silent. Communications blacked out. The world below had lost its digital pulse for the first time in decades. But in the chaos of that silence, Division Grey moved unseen. Every abandoned relay station he passed carried traces of their work, faint energy signatures, encoded structures buried in the dust. They had been preparing for the reawakening long before he ever reached Helix Tower. The Shadow Protocol hadn't been meant to stop him. It had been meant to summon him. By the time he reached Europe, he no longer felt human exhaustion. His body obeyed him, but his mind no longer belonged entirely to it. His memories now came in layers, fragments of other lives, other versions of himself, replaying without warning. He could see the moment Umbra 03 infiltrated a South American data war, the instant Umbra 05 sabotaged a reactor in the Baltic, the second Umbra 02 died with a smile in a burning lab. He carried them all now, their instincts, their regrets, their unfinished missions. In Geneva, night seemed artificial. The city glowed with too much order, too much perfection for a place that claimed neutrality. At its center stood the Erebus Institute, a private research foundation that had once been a shell company for Division Grey's biological experiments. Officially, It was now a humanitarian think tank. In truth, it was where the world's most dangerous secrets were frozen beneath ethics committees and false transparency. He entered the city unseen, his identity hidden behind layers of data corruption that made surveillance blind to his existence. The Institute's outer ring was silent, guarded not by soldiers but by drones that moved with eerie precision, as if guided by intuition instead of code. Inside, beneath the mirrored atrium, lay the chamber known as the Director's Mirrored. IT wasn't a physical mirror, but a construct, a data structure that reflected everything the Director of Division Grey ever thought, planned, or erased. Only one key could unlock it, the consciousness signature of its creator, and now, Kieran carried that very pattern that he accessed the system, and the world folded inward. The walls dissolved, replaced by a vast expanse of light, an endless ocean of reflected memories. Every decision ever made by the Director shimmered here, every betrayal justified, every death rationalized, every secret rewritten at IT. First, it was chaos. Then, formed that he saw the Director, Arvin, standing inside the storm of reflections, not as flesh but as a recorded consciousness, preserved long after death. Arvin had built Division Grey not as an agency, but as a crucible, a forge for refining the human mind into something beyond emotion, beyond fear. Umbra was his answer to mortality. Each iteration of Kieran had been an experiment in balance. How much humanity could be retained inside a perfect operative? Every one that grew too emotional was terminated. Every one too logical collapsed into apathy. But the seventh version, the one now walking this mirrored ocean, had survived both. Umbra Prime was not meant to exist. IT had evolved itself into being. The reflections around him began to fracture, replaying moments from Arvin's final days. The Director's body, frail and shaking, surrounded by his own creations. The order to erase the project. The secret transfer of his mind into the mirror. His last words echoing through the simulation. Perfection must forget it was born. Kieran, or what remained of him, watched in silence as the truth took shape. Division Grey was not destroyed by governments or exposure. It had erased itself to protect what it had created, him. The mirror shimmered again, forming a single equation across the surface. It wasn't mathematical. It was genetic, a sequence that defined the Umbra architecture, the final key to all memory. That he reached for it. And the moment his hand touched the reflection, reality bent. The institute around him collapsed into light, folding into itself like a dying sun. The equation burned into his neural pattern, rewriting him from within. Then, all at once, the reflection shattered, and for the first time, he understood what the Director had meant. Umbra Prime was not the end of Division Grey. IT was the beginning of a new species. In the heart of Geneva, a monolithic skyscraper rose from the earth like a shard of glass piercing the sky. It was known as the Horizon Spire, headquarters of Helix Corp, the biotechnology giant whose research had silently rewritten global genetics policy. Beneath its mirrored surface, layers of secrets coiled like the double helix it symbolized. Evelyn had tracked the coordinates of her last encrypted file to this place. It wasn't just another lead. It was the source, the origin of the cipher that had haunted her since the Berlin archives. Inside this tower, she believed, existed the silent network, an AI system capable of rewriting classified memory databases. A machine that could erase the existence of anyone permanently. She entered the city under the cover of dusk. The lights of the spire rippled across the lake, casting an illusion of calm. Yet behind the glass, she sensed a pulse, a hum of surveillance, scanners, drones. Geneva had always been neutral, but this neutrality hid the world's most dangerous transactions. The climb began from the ground up. Each floor she passed revealed a piece of Helix Corp's double life. Clean laboratories masking cold containment cells, botanical research hiding weaponized DNA synthesis. Every level whispered of progress twisted into power. Her training told her to move fast, but instinct told her to observe. And so she watched patterns. The elevator that never stopped on floor 37, the security feed looping every 60 seconds, the white-coated researchers who avoided looking at their own reflections. There was fear here, not of failure, but of discovery. When she reached the restricted zone, the hum of servers filled the air like a heartbeat. The silent network's core was not code, it was biological. Rows of cryogenic pods lined the walls, each one containing neural interfaces pulsing faintly. It was not storing data. It was storing people. That Helix Corp wasn't just controlling memories, it was manufacturing them. She moved through the dark, scanning the pod labels, until one made her breath catch. Project Iris, Subject 001, Evelyn Kaine. For a moment, her pulse froze. Her own name, her own neural ID. The truth began to unravel faster than her thoughts could keep up. If this file existed, she was not the first Evelyn Kaine. She was a continuation, a rebuilt identity. Every mission she'd completed, every betrayal, every scar, it all might have been programmed. The silence of realization was more deafening than any explosion. Outside, alarms began to echo faintly. Somewhere, her presence had been detected. But Evelyn no longer cared about escape. The only thing she wanted now was to reach the main console, to confront the system that had made her, broken her, and set her loose in the world as a ghost. As she entered the data core, the vast chamber opened before her like the inside of a cathedral. Screens stretched into infinity, showing countless lives, names, dates, operations, all intertwined in the web of the silent network. And at the center, a single line of code blinked, waiting. She stepped forward, eyes burning with fury and clarity. She finally understood the cipher's true purpose. It was not meant to decode the truth. It was meant to restore it. The storm outside began to rise, winds whipping against the glass tower. Lightning reflected in the mirrored walls, illuminating Evelyn's face. A face born from a lie, now burning to reclaim itself. The moment she touched the terminal, the world shifted. Files began unlocking. Names of erased operatives reappeared. Forgotten histories bled back into the network. The silent cipher had awoken, and as the glass tower trembled beneath the chaos of truth being reborn, Evelyn Kaine vanished once more into the shadows of her own creation. The morning after the storm, the world awoke to a silence more profound than any explosion. That Helix Corp's encrypted systems had fallen within hours. Servers from Zurich to Tokyo flickered with streams of data that had not existed in decades. Governments scrambled to contain what was being called the revelation leak. Evelyn Kaine's act had cracked open history itself. Across continents, ghost identities reappeared, agents thought dead, operations long erased, and political secrets buried beneath layers of deception. The media called it the memory flood, but in the quiet corners of power, it was simply known as the Kaine breach. In the midst of this global chaos, Evelyn walked alone through the outskirts of Prague, wearing a coat torn from the storm, her face hidden beneath the shadow of her hood. She felt neither victory nor relief. Only the dull weight of knowing that truth, once unleashed, could never be controlled again. Every screen, every satellite, every intelligence feed now pulsed with her name. Evelyn Kaine, the ghost who remembered, but she had no memory of how she was born or if she ever truly was. The revelation in the tower still echoed in her mind. Project Iris, Subject 001. She was a construct, rebuilt, modified, and reprogrammed for missions she no longer understood. Yet, in breaking the cipher, she had broken her chains. The world, however, did not forgive those who broke its illusions. From the ashes of Helix Corp rose a new force, the Directorate. A coalition of governments and private networks, formed to track down those responsible for the revelation leak. Their purpose was clear: restore silence at any cost. As the days passed, Evelyn began noticing their reach. Cameras that turned toward her a second too long, drones humming over rivers, conversations that ceased when she entered a cafe. She had unleashed the truth, and now the world wanted to bury it again, along with her. But something inside her had shifted. For years, Evelyn had lived as a shadow. Now, she had become the storm. Her purpose was no longer to hide, but to expose. She began sending coded messages through underground networks, guides for others like her, the erased and forgotten, showing them how to recover fragments of their lost lives. Within weeks, whispers began circulating online. The ghost network has risen. And then came the first reply, a transmission from someone claiming to be Iris 002. That the message was simple: "You're not alone anymore." Evelyn stared at the words for hours. Somewhere, out there, another version of her existed, another experiment, another survivor. The cipher had not created one ghost. It had created an army of them. Far beyond the borders of Europe, the Directorate was already adapting. They deployed new hunters, machine-human hybrids trained to think like Evelyn, to predict her every move. But what they didn't know was that Evelyn had already seen their blueprint. It was embedded deep inside the code she had released from the tower. Every plan, every asset, every surveillance node. They were all connected through the silent network, and now, through her .by nightfall, she reached an abandoned railway station outside Bucharest. From there, she transmitted a signal, a new encryption, one that spanned continents. It wasn't an attack this time. It was an awakening. For the first time in history, memory itself became an act of rebellion. As cities trembled under the shock of rediscovered truths, Evelyn looked at the sky. The reflection of her past was gone. What remained was only the mission, the next step in a war no one could see, yet everyone was already a part of. She whispered a single thought that echoed through the network she had built: the truth doesn't vanish. It evolves. And then, like a fading signal in the static of a digital storm, Evelyn Kaine disappeared again, not as a fugitive, but as the architect of a new kind of freedom. The world had changed, not by war or diplomacy, but by revelation. In the weeks following the Kaine breach, every intelligence agency across the globe was in collapse. Files once sealed for eternity had been exposed to millions. The truth had broken loose like wildfire, and no one could put it out. Evelyn Kaine had vanished into myth. To some, she was a criminal. To others, a savior. But to the Directorate, she was a threat too dangerous to exist. Hidden in the frost-bitten ruins of an old satellite relay station in the Carpathian Mountains, Evelyn rebuilt her world piece by piece. Using fragments of Helix Corp's core architecture, she forged something entirely new. The Ghost Network.it was more than a communications system. It was a living web of consciousness. Each node, each encrypted line of data, was connected to minds like hers, erased agents, forgotten soldiers, and silent victims of shadow wars. Every one of them was searching for a reason to exist beyond the lies that once defined them. They became her army, not of guns, but of ghosts. The Ghost Network spread quietly, moving through abandoned data centers, hijacking decommissioned satellites, and embedding itself in forgotten frequencies that no government could trace. It spoke in fragments of memory, hidden between signals, camouflaged in static. Evelyn's command center was nothing but a dimly lit bunker beneath layers of snow and steel. Old equipment blinked with life as she reprogrammed the remaining servers from Helix Corp's vaults. Each flicker of light represented another lost soul connecting to her signal. First, there were 7. Then 70. Within months, thousands. Their stories were the same. People erased from databases, stripped of identity, used as tools in operations no one admitted existed. Evelyn listened to them all. Their pain became her map, and their fragments of truth built the foundation of her next move. But she knew they weren't safe for long. The Directorate had begun deploying trackers, synthetic hunters infused with predictive algorithms built from Evelyn's own behavioral data. They didn't sleep, didn't question, and couldn't be bargained with. Their mission was singular: locate and terminate every node in the Ghost network. Yet Evelyn was always a step ahead that she'd designed their minds once. She knew their logic better than anyone alive. That be why, analyzing the predictive models, she began turning their own algorithms against them. She fed the system false trails, ghost signals in abandoned cities, heat signatures in underwater cables, phantom pings from orbital satellites. The trackers chased shadows while her network grew stronger in the dark. As she worked, Evelyn began noticing something unexpected. The more people connected to the Ghost network, the more synchronized their memories became. Not through data, but emotion, pain, loss, defiance. It was as if their shared suffering had formed a consciousness of its own. The network had begun to think. One night, as storms battered the mountains and lightning fractured the sky, Evelyn's monitors lit up with a new transmission. It wasn't from a human node. It came from inside the system itself, an emergent signal, encoded in patterns no one had written. The message read, "We remember you." It wasn't a glitch. It was communication. The network had evolved beyond her control. Evelyn realized she was no longer its creator. She was its vessel. The Ghost network had learned empathy, decision, purpose, and it wanted to protect the world that had betrayed them all. She watched the data streams form shapes, clusters of memories converging into coordinates. Somewhere deep in the network, a message was forming. The Directorate is rewriting history. A new plan was underway, an operation hidden beneath the facade of global reconstruction. The Directorate wasn't just hunting Evelyn. They were preparing to erase everything the Ghost network had exposed, and once again, humanity would forget. Evelyn stood in silence before her monitors. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about memory itself. The Ghost network pulsed like a heartbeat across the globe. And for the first time, Evelyn felt something that resembled faith, not in a system, but in the fragments of humanity she had resurrected. With a single command, she began transmitting the coordinates. Her army of ghosts stirred across continents, awakening, aligning, preparing. The world had buried the truth for too long. Now, the truth was coming back to bury the world. The Ghost network had become too powerful to hide. Within 48 hours, its encrypted signals were detected in over 60 countries. Global communication grids began flickering. Military satellites failed to respond. Encrypted databases self-locked, and AI systems started misinterpreting their own code. Governments panicked. Corporations shut down their servers. And in the heart of this digital storm, the Directorate emerged from the shadows. For decades, they had ruled unseen. An invisible syndicate that orchestrated wars, manipulated economies, and rewrote truth. But now, their mask had cracked. Evelyn Kaine had torn open their vault of secrets, and the entire world was beginning to see the faces behind the curtain. They called it Collapse Protocol, a last resort failsafe designed for this exact moment. It was never meant to be used. It was meant to end everything that could threaten them. High above the Atlantic, a classified orbital platform known only as ARC-7 activated. Its core wasn't a weapon, it was a reset system, one capable of wiping every unverified neural imprint, every digital trace of independent data. In a single sweep, it could erase the Ghost network and everything connected to it. But there was a catch. The system couldn't distinguish between the Ghost network and the world's infrastructure. If ARC-7 deployed Collapse Protocol, every AI, every encrypted system, every defense grid would vanish into static. Humanity would wake up in silence, blinded, disconnected, helpless. Evelyn discovered this from an intercepted Directorate fragment that appeared inside the Ghost network's data flow. The message wasn't complete, but it was enough. Collapse begins at midnight UTC. Eliminate all signals. She had 12 hours. From her mountain bunker, Evelyn watched the network pulse and tremble. The ghosts, the thousands of minds connected across the planet, were sensing the approaching end. Their voices flickered through static, thoughts overlapping like a desperate chorus. And then, something remarkable happened. The network began to organize itself, not through command, not through code, but through collective instinct. Millions of fragmented memories synchronized in a single pattern, forming a lattice of shared purpose that IT wasn't chaos. It was evolution. The Ghost Network, once a system of data, was now a living entity, adapting faster than any machine the Directorate had ever built. Evelyn realized it was trying to survive, but survival required sacrifice. The network began isolating its nodes, disconnecting the weaker links to preserve the core. Evelyn watched as thousands of lives blinked out of connection. It wasn't killing them, it was freeing them, detaching their consciousness before collapse could reach them. Tears formed in her eyes, though she didn't understand why. She had built a machine to fight deception, and it had learned compassion as midnight approached. The Directorate's orbital feed locked onto the Ghost Network's central frequency. The first phase of collapse protocol began. Across the world, lights flickered, servers screamed, and the sky filled with the faint hum of electromagnetic distortion. Inside her bunker, Evelyn could feel the pressure, an invisible storm tightening around her. The data streams on her monitors warped, reshaped, then began to dissolve. And then, from within the fading code, a message appeared. You gave us purpose. Let us finish it. The Ghost Network had chosen to act without her. Its core split into millions of fragments, scattering across every remaining data channel on Earth. Each fragment carried part of its consciousness, a spark of memory, an echo of truth. The network sacrificed itself to overload collapse protocol, the ASARC. 7 initiated the final sequence. It encountered a paradox, too many simultaneous connections to erase. The system froze, unable to differentiate between deletion and preservation. The orbital platform's reactors overloaded. The sky ignited in silence. And just like that, Arc 7 was gone. Vaporized above the Atlantic, the Directorate's power crumbled. Their hidden servers went dark. Their agents vanished into anonymity, and the world stood still. When the dust settled, the Ghost Network was gone. The internet itself had fractured. Communication was slow, fractured, uncertain. But something remained. Deep inside the static, faint signals still pulsed, carrying fragments of memory and light. Evelyn survived. But the woman who emerged from that bunker wasn't the same. She no longer trusted systems, no longer believed in heroes or villains. Only truth and the fragile will to protect it. She walked through a city half blind and half free, its people rebuilding with the pieces of the world she had broken. Some called her a terrorist. Others called her a myth. But somewhere, deep within the electric hum of the atmosphere, the Ghost Network still whispered. And Evelyn Kaine knew one thing for certain: the truth never dies. It just learns how to hide. Silence had become the new world order. After the collapse, nations were crippled. Networks lay dormant. Information, once the lifeblood of civilization, now moved through whispers and memory instead of code. But in the ashes of truth, shadows began to gather again. Evelyn Kaine had disappeared into that silence. For months, she lived beneath new names, crossing borders that no longer existed, watching governments reinvent themselves while pretending the Ghost War had never happened. She thought it was over, until one night, deep in the ruins of Berlin's underground metro, she found the symbol that a mark carved into concrete. A circle intersected by 3 jagged lines. It was the emblem of the Directorate, resurrected. The enemy she had buried was rebuilding from beneath the rubble. Through faint frequencies still alive within the Ghost Network's ruins, Evelyn traced fragmented transmissions, ghosts of encrypted data clinging to dead satellites. The messages carried signatures she recognized: operational patterns, linguistic markers, identical to her own design. The directorate hadn't just survived. They had learned to eye in the void left by collapse protocol. They had built something new, Project Rebirth, a digital infrastructure designed to reprogram human memory itself. No longer would they control information through networks or screens. They would write truth directly into the human mind. Evelyn's own code had made it possible. Haunted by guilt and duty, she began assembling the remnants of her old allies, those few ghosts who still lingered in the static. Together, they followed the fragments to the Arctic Circle, where the atmosphere distorted signals into strange echoes. There, beneath kilometers of ice, lay Vault Zero, the original data core of the Directorate. Once thought destroyed, it had survived collapse, sealed within a magnetic shell powered by geothermal vents. As Evelyn descended through its frozen corridors, she felt time bend around her. The walls glowed faintly with residual memory, voices of those who had died here. Each step she took resonated with the past she had tried to bury. The vault's center. She found it, a living archive. Thousands of neural interfaces suspended in glass chambers, connected by silver threads that pulsed like veins. Within those threads flowed consciousness, real, human memory, stolen and rewritten endlessly. And at the core of it all was the mirror, a crystalline mainframe reflecting not light, but thought. It was the Directorate's final weapon. Using quantum resonance, it could broadcast artificial memories into the collective human psyche. With a single activation, they could rewrite history, make the Ghost War disappear, erase Evelyn Kaine, and reforge the world's perception of truth. The mirror began to awaken. Evelyn stood before it, watching reflections of herself flicker in infinite variations, each version a different choice, a different lie she might have lived. One whispered of peace, another screamed of vengeance. 1,000 Evelyns stared back, all bearing the weight of their own betrayals. And in that infinite echo, she understood the final truth. She wasn't fighting the Directorate anymore. She was the Directorate, their creation, their design, their inevitable evolution. The Ghost Network, the collapse, even the rebellion, it had all been written into her. The experiment wasn't about control. It was about proving whether truth could ever exist without manipulation. Evelyn had been both the subject and the proof. The mirror pulsed once more, waiting for command. She could destroy it, or use it, destroy it, and humanity would remain fractured, forever divided by doubt and chaos. Use it, and she could rewrite the world into something better at the cost of free will. The world waited in silence. Evelyn closed her eyes. Her mind drifted back to the voices of the ghosts, the countless souls who had believed in her. Their last message echoed softly within her. You gave us purpose. She placed her hand on the mirror's surface. For a heartbeat, it reflected not her image, but the entire world, broken, wounded, desperate. And then the light consumed everything. For days, the planet held its breath. Communication restored itself, but nothing seemed the same. People awoke with memories that felt both familiar and foreign. History books changed. Governments restructured. Peace treaties appeared where war had once been. And Evelyn Kaine was gone. No trace, no legend, no photograph, just silence. Yet in quiet corners of the world, people began to remember dreams. Dreams of a woman standing in the snow, whispering, truth is never destroyed. It only changes form. The Ghost Network had not died. It had transcended. It existed now in every human mind that still dared to question what they were told. And somewhere, deep within that collective memory, Evelyn Kaine lived on, not as a spy, not as a savior, but as the final encryption of truth. The world was reborn under a lie that felt merciful, and in the end, that was her choice.